All right, now we'll look at the solubility rules, and I've given us 10 or 12 questions here to practice with the solubility rules that I've given here at the bottom. When you take the exam, you can have these solubility rules with you, so you just need to make sure that you know how to use them. So it says circle the compounds below that should be soluble in water. So I'll remind you, you always want to look at the anion, with the anion's the second atom or second group that's given there. So you want to look at the anion first in order to use the table. So sodium chloride, chloride salts are usually soluble, and sodium is not an exception to that. So sodium chloride is most definitely soluble in water. Bromide salts are usually soluble, and magnesium's not an exception to that. So magnesium bromide is soluble. Chloride salts are usually soluble. Iron is also not an exception to that. Iron is soluble. Bromide salts are usually soluble. However, silver is an exception to that. So silver bromide is not soluble. Chloride salts are usually soluble. Zinc is not an exception to that. So zinc is soluble. Chloride salts are usually soluble. However, mercury is an exception to that. So this mercury salt is insoluble. All right, finally something a little bit more interesting. This one right here, sodium sulfide. Sulfide salts are usually insoluble. However, the alkali metal ions and ammonium are exceptions. So sodium sulfide is soluble. This is silver carbonate. Carbonate salts are usually insoluble. Carbonate usually insoluble, and silver is not an exception to that, so that remains insoluble. Sulfide salts are usually insoluble. Silver is not an exception to that, so remains insoluble. Sulfate salts are usually soluble. However, barium sulfate is insoluble. It's an exception to the rule of sulfates usually being soluble. Chloride salts are usually soluble. However, silver is an exception. Nitrate salts. So nitrate salts, these have no exceptions if you look. So nitrate, bicarbonate, chlorates, any of those anions, if they're in your compound, it is always soluble. So silver nitrate is soluble.